Welcome to our Women's Bible Study on Revelation's 7 letters to the churches. Today we're going to be looking at the letter that Jesus sent to Smyrna. It's only 4 verses long, but it has a powerful message for us that I believe you're really going to enjoy. A little bit about Smyrna. Smyrna was one of the large, beautiful cities in the Roman Empire, just 40 miles north of the city of Ephesus. It was a tremendous economic city where there was a lot of trade passing through its port all throughout the area of Asia. Smyrna was known to be a city that was faithful to Rome. That also meant that they supported Caesar. You know, in the Roman Empire, they believed that Caesar was a god. And Smyrna was faithful and supportive and were constantly pledging their allegiance by saying that Caesar was Lord. This made it really difficult for Christians in Smyrna. The church at Smyrna was established in about the year 53 AD by Paul on his 3rd missionary trip. This was a hard place to be a church because Christians were looked down on. They were not trusted, and it became a place where Christians were terribly persecuted. To the angel of the church at Smyrna write, "These are the words of him who is the first and the last, who died and came back to life again. I know your afflictions and your poverty, yet you are rich. I know about the slander of those who say they are Jews and are not, but are a synagogue of Satan. Do not be afraid of what you are about to suffer. I tell you, the devil will put some of you in prison to test you, and you will suffer persecution for 10 days. Be faithful, even to the point of death, and I will give you a crown of life. Whoever has ears, let them hear what the Spirit says to the churches. The one who is victorious will not be hurt at all by the second death." You will notice that the church at Smyrna is a church that Jesus is proud of because he knows what they're going through. They are a church that is in the process of persecution, and actually the church is in the process of being martyred. Christians were looked down upon. They were discriminated against. They were not trusted. So there was sort of this unspoken okay to take advantage of Christians. Many people wouldn't do business with them, so it made them hard for them to make a living. Many people would steal from them. Mobs would ransack their homes and their businesses. And in the history of the first 2 centuries, there were Christians that were tried, persecuted, and even put to death. It was a very difficult place to be a Christian. So this was a church that was going through a lot of suffering. And that's the reason that Jesus says, as he introduces himself, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the one who is dead and alive." He's trying to speak to them and saying, no matter what you're going through, I know what you are suffering. I've been there and I am with you. So in this letter, there's no condemnation. Jesus doesn't have anything against this church because they are making the right stand and being witnesses for Jesus Christ under the most brutal and terrible circumstances. There's a reference in this of the synagogue of Satan. Many of these Christians had Jewish backgrounds, and they knew about the Jewish faith, and they knew about the Jewish scriptures. And in their city, there was a synagogue of Jews that didn't accept Jesus as the Messiah. And we believe that many were informing the government on the members of the church at Smyrna and inciting the persecution of these people. And they very likely did it by encouraging them to go up to the members of the church of Smyrna and say, see if they'll say Caesar is Lord. Of course, no Christian would say that because their allegiance was to Jesus Christ. But these Jews who should have been accepting Jesus as the Savior was actually using that as a weapon against them. And so many of the Christians suffered because of that. And Jesus right out says, this is something that's from Satan. This is not a synagogue that honors him. This is a synagogue of Satan. Jesus says, don't be afraid of what you're about to suffer. Satan will try to test you for 10 days. This whole idea of being tempted, that would be a trigger for all the Christians who knew the stories from the Old Testament. And when they heard the word testing, they would think of Daniel and his 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who had been taken off into captivity into Babylon. And because they were some of the brightest and the best, what Babylon did was they put them in these special training groups where they would be trained and prepared to be administrators and government officials that would run the country and its business. So this was a high honor. And in doing so, they tried to make them Babylonian. They gave them Babylonian names. They gave them the best and finest food to eat. But the problem was this food had been sacrificed in the temples to the gods of Babylon. This was something that Daniel and his 3 friends would not do, because they were going to be faithful to God, even though they were in a far-off country and even though they were looked down on because of who they were. So Daniel went to the man who was responsible for their care and their instruction. And Daniel says, well, test us for 10 days. Let us eat vegetables and see if we're not healthy and if we don't do better than all the other students. And after 10 days, they saw that Daniel and his friends were healthier and excelling in their studies, and they were very pleased with that. So after 3 years of study and preparation, Daniel and his 3 friends were interviewed by Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon. And isn't it interesting what the scripture says? Is that in every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king questioned them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his whole kingdom. They were smarter than anyone, even the more mature and the older administrators. So God took care of them. God blessed them. And of course, we know in Daniel chapter 3, there is the other story about Daniel's 3 friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were put in a place where they were ordered to worship one of the idols and the gods of Babylon, and they refused to. And as a result, they were thrown into the fiery furnace. And as they were being threatened, then Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, it says, it doesn't matter whether we survive or not, but our God is going to be faithful, and we will not worship the gods of Babylon. King Nebuchadnezzar ordered that the furnace be made 7 times hotter so it would just liquefy these 3 faithful followers of God. And when they threw them in the fiery furnace, they all noticed that there was a 4th person that was standing in there with them. And the scripture said he was one like the sons of God. Well, they survived. And when they were brought out, King Nebuchadnezzar was so impressed. He passed an edict and he said, anyone that speaks against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they will be cut to pieces, and all of their possessions and their homes will be turned into rubble, because there's no God that can save like the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. You see, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were in a culture that was against them, and they were faithful to God, and they trusted that God would take care of them. And so they lived as representatives of their God, even in a culture that didn't respect and didn't believe in their God. You see what God was telling the church at Smyrna, that they were like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They were living in a strange foreign land that didn't accept them, that looked down on them, but he was encouraging them to be faithful. He was encouraging them to stand for Jesus Christ no matter what would happen to them. And being a Christian in Smyrna was very difficult. The church at Smyrna was severely persecuted for almost 170 years until the city was destroyed by an earthquake. But in that time, they suffered greatly. And some of the historical records describe the most horrible treatment to these Christians. Yet they were faithful. Yet they stood for Christ, and they trusted that God would be with them. And Jesus makes them a promise and says that they will not suffer the second death. In Revelation chapter 21, verse 8, we're told what the second death is. And that's after Jesus returns, and the people who are not faithful to Jesus, those who have been opponents to Jesus Christ and his rule, they will be sent apart. They will be sent to hell. And this is the second death. These people who have faithfully stood and been witnesses, these are the ones, they will not suffer the second death. And the words that Jesus says to them, he says, I know your afflictions. I know what you're going through. I know how hard it is for you to follow me. But he gives them this promise. He says, be faithful to death, and I will give you a crown of life. Think about that. Be faithful. That is what Jesus calls us to do. He calls us to be faithful to him, to stand up for him. Jesus knows how they have suffered. He understands because he suffered. He is the one who knows what rejection and suffering is all about. That's what he endured on the cross for us. So he's telling them that if you want to follow me, that you must deny yourself, pick up your cross, and follow. The promise that Jesus makes to the people of Smyrna, be faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. Be faithful for your entire life, and you will have the crown of life with me forever in heaven. You know, being faithful isn't always easy. Sometimes standing up for Christ and trying to live with a Christ mindset puts you in a place where you're going to be ridiculed. Sometimes it's from family, sometimes it's from close friends. Some people will never accept your commitment to Jesus Christ, and you will always feel a sense of ridicule from them. Sometimes it's from your closest friends. Sometimes you will feel the persecution and the criticism of them. You don't have to defend yourself from the criticism of others. You let Jesus do that. You let your life and how you've lived and your example speak for itself. And you let God deal with your critics and with those who do hurt you or harm you. That's something he will deal with. He calls upon us to be faithful. What does faithful mean to you? You're going to have a great study talking about this tremendous concept of how can we have the mindset of being faithful to Jesus and living the way he wants us to. What does that look like for you? In what areas maybe do you need to give that some attention? You need to always remember that Jesus knows what you're going through. He knows every emotion, every struggle. And he says, be faithful. I'm wondering today what God is calling you to do to realign yourself to being a follower of Jesus Christ. You know, right now, it's a challenge to follow Jesus. being a follower of Jesus is not as popular as it once was. And sometimes Christians feel discriminated and maybe criticized by others and not trusted by others just because of our Christian faith. But the word of Jesus is be faithful, be faithful. How can we do that together? You're going to have a great study tonight. This is a powerful message to us right now in this time in which we are living. God bless you as you enjoy this wonderful letter of Jesus for you.